acknowledgement was long overdue. But what will change after this report? That's the big question. Canada continues to accuse India of meddling and overall has really shown no attempts to assuage Indian concerns on Khalistan agenda on its soil. Without action, what purpose will this report serve? And is the political reality in Canada finally capable of putting violent plans against India in their place on its soil? We'll take that and more to our guests joining us in just a bit. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service, first up, confirmed that pro-Khalistan elements operate in Canada. This is what they have said in their yearly report. Khalistan extremists continue to operate in Canada. They use Canada as a base to plot against India, and these plots include Khalistani extremists using Canadian soil for the promotion, fundraising and planning of violence, primarily in India. Now, the word violence here is extremely important because this is no longer about freedom of speech or expression or the right to protest and assemble. This has been always about violent tendencies that the K gang shows very openly in front of cameras, and otherwise the fact that it condones the killing of Indian leaders in the past and even makes threatening statements against present Indian leaders. The Canadian Intel's admission on Khalistani extremism is a long overdue acknowledgement, as I said, but in the same breath, the agency also continued its tirade against India. Canadian Intel named India as one of the perpetrators of foreign interference and espionage in Canada, alongside countries like China, Russia, Iran and Pakistan. The report claimed that the Nijjar case revealed links between Government of India and criminal networks. This despite them giving no real proof of it yet. The report even accused Indian officials and their alleged Canada-based proxy agents of influencing Canadian elections. Now, India has staunchly denied involvement in Nijjar's death and rejected earlier allegations of interference made by Ottawa. But there are several questions that Canada needs to answer, especially with regards to the probe in Nijjar. Delays in indictment, they show a lack of preparedness. Why is there no conclusion as far as their own legal processes are concerned? No substantial evidence that has undermined Canada's position repeatedly. A lot of time has passed. We've not really seen anything new. Shoddy investigations also show that there is an element of pandering to K elements in Canada. Remember, Nijjar is on camera, on videos, getting arms training. Those videos went viral after his assassination, but they seem to be ignored by Canadian agencies. Why do they act like they don't know what Nijjar was up to? There have been threats to the Indian state that have been issued by him and other proxies as well, also ignored by Canada. Are these not legitimate questions to ask? So we ask this question today. After this admission, what will change? When is the action going to come? That with our guests coming up. Let's go across to our guest joining us, Professor Brahmachaleni, Strategic Affairs Expert, Yashwardhan Kumar Sinha, former diplomat with us, Ramneek Singh Mann, activist, will also be joining us. Mr. Sinha, I want to begin with you and ask you exactly what you make of this admission. Why has it come now, you think?
Thank you for having me on your show, Shivani. I think this admission is only an acceptance of what everybody knew in India and Canada and elsewhere. This has been going on for decades. As I said in one of the other shows, you can recall the Kanishk bombing, the Atlantic in 1985. That ghastly incident, people responsible, some of them still roam around scot-free. So Canada has been a hub for Khalistani terrorists for many, many years, indeed decades. So this admission, better late than never. I do hope that under a new government in Canada, under the new Prime Minister, Michael Carney, I think relations will improve. And I do hope that they will crack down on these elements, because ultimately the threat is to Canada itself. Tomorrow, I'm not saying it will happen, but tomorrow there may be a call for instance, Khalistan in British Columbia, when they
Yeah.
realize that they can't get a Khalistan in India. So I think they need, for their own interest, for their own security interest, to crack down on these terrorist elements.
Brahmachaleni is also with us. Brahmachaleni, do you feel that this is some sort of a mending of ways? What has changed in the Canadian thinking to finally accept that there is this menace and that there is a propensity shown towards violence that they plan on Canadian soil versus India? That certainly then cannot be used, cannot be justified under the garb of freedom of speech, protest, and etc.
You're right, absolutely, Shivani. Earlier this week, Carney and Modi signaled a diplomatic thaw. They agreed to send new high commissioners. So that was an important step. This report by CSIS, as it's known, CSIS, Canada's main intelligence agency, was obviously written much before the Carney-Modi meeting. Probably was written months earlier and released now. This is the 2024 annual report. And while it acknowledges that a small group of Khalistanis are extremists and promoting violence primarily in India, it actually has larger paragraphs slamming India for its interference in Canada's affairs, for using proxy agents in Canada, and for drawing a direct link between the Indian government and the Niger murder.
Yes.
Those sections are appalling because they show that CSIS still, is ready to hold India accountable for actions that are still under investigation by its own admission in the report. It says that the murder of Niger is still under investigation.
Exactly.
And yet in its report, it jumps to the conclusion, it accuses India of being directly involved in the murder of Niger, which goes to show that the mindset in CSIS has not changed.
In fact, I'm glad you pointed that out. Brahmachaleni, I don't know if you heard, but in my opening, as I established this story, I talked exactly about that there are no conclusions of their own processes as far as Niger's killing is concerned. So how is anybody supposed to believe the conclusions that they've come to? And the fact that their intelligence agency says one thing while their law processes haven't been able to establish that shows that this is coming from somewhere else.
Yes, and I think the root cause of the India-Canada tensions is the fact that successive governments in Canada since the early 1980s have given political space to Khalistan terrorists. The result was the twin Air India bombings of 1985. Fortunately for Canada, India did not exert sustained pressure on Ottawa. After those twin bombings of 1985, Canada took 21 years to institute a commission of inquiry into those twin bombings. The problem in India is that we suddenly wake up and we speak about an issue, and then after a while we allow that issue to fade away from public discourse.
But do you think this signals some sort of a change at all, or no? Because the same report, as you're saying, goes on to also accuse India and make accusations that are not justified by proof just yet.
No, Shivani, the diplomatic thaw has occurred largely because Carney is seeking access to the Indian market. The Canadian economy is stagnating. Canada's relations with the two big giants, China and India, are strained. And Carney has reached out both to China and to India to reset diplomatic ties, largely because his agenda is economic. And he realizes that the only way you can revive the Canadian economy is by improving relations with India and China. The question is about India. What is India securing by returning high commissioners? Has India secured an assurance from Carney that Indian diplomats will be able to function in Canada with
without any fear and threats.
yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
No, absolutely. I'll come to that question. Why not? Why shouldn't India use that economic might then that Canada is so that is so important to Canadian interests now to get what it also wants? I'll come to that question, and Mr. Sinha can also come in on this. But Ramneek Mann, Indian activist who's obviously focused a lot on the Khalistani movement, is also joining us. Ramneek Mann, what do you make of this K admission by Canada? Will anything change? Can we expect any action? Do you think time has come for India to assert itself more?
Hi, Shivani. Good evening. And, the Canadians have been running with the hare and hunting with the hounds. So they have to take a side. They have to finally decide whether they will permit these Khalistani extremists to operate from their soil, to emit, terrorism and the thought of separatism in India from their soil, or they're going to put a stop to it. As a matter of fact, this is the first admission coming from Canada that the Canadians have actually, the Khalistanis have actually been a problem for Canada. Either the kind of people that they've been accepting, we have a MLAT, that's a mutual legal agreement treaty. So they've not been honoring the MLAT, and as the gentleman before me was referring to, you see, Shivani, in the 1970s late, when Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, was the prime minister, India had extended a request for extradition of Sarvinder Parmar. That didn't happen, and eventually 329 people in the Kanishka lost their lives, and 2 Japanese handlers lost their life in Japan. So there were a total of 331 lives lost for account of one extradition, and now there are 50 plus extradition requests which are pending with the Canadians. So they have to now really come up, and they have to show their seriousness when it comes to dealing with the Khalistanis. As a matter of fact, there have been human trafficking, drug trafficking, gun menace, all of this. You will find traces of Khalistanis involved in this. So this first dossier that you see is where they accept the Khalistanis, but they still are trying to say that the agents of government of India were involved. So, it's the policy of running with the hare and hunting with the hounds that cannot work. So Canadians have to take a stance once and for all, and finally, they have to realize that India is a very important partner for them.
Exactly.
And these internal problems, because these Khalistanis are primarily Canadian citizens, and they're trying to destabilize India, or they want to balkanize India, break India. That should not be allowed.
Yeah, actually, the whole thing about Canada, sticking to this whole Nijja thing is, oh, he's a Canadian citizen, oh, he's a Canadian citizen. Weren't you aware of what he was up to, Mr. Sinha? I mean, this is a central question that I keep asking. I mean, Canadians can't be, up in umbrage because of what happened to Nijjar, but completely turn a blind eye to what these Canadian citizens are up to. And if they're accepting that this is violent in nature, there is no excuse for it. But I want to take forward that point as well of accusing India of some sort of espionage and all. These are serious charges. Don't you think the Indian External Affairs Ministry, the bureaucrat community, the Foreign Affairs community should also take it up more strongly? You can't just make these accusations and get away with it.
I think this matter has been taken up at the highest levels in the past by successive prime ministers. I remember Dr. Manmohan Singh taking it up. As far as Niger is concerned, for instance, read the New York Times of today. Their reporter here, whether the reporter based here or the editor in New York, refers to Niger as a prominent Canadian Sikh cleric. That is a joke. It is bizarre that they call him a prominent cleric. He is a terrorist. He was a terrorist.
This is the New York Times? They love clerics.
This is the New York Times. I'm quoting directly from the New York Times.
They love all clerics, especially ones who have terrorist backgrounds.
Canadian Sikh cleric. I mean, that's how they describe it. So this is par for the course as far as they are concerned. This admission, I hope, will lead to, if not a change of heart, at least some cooperation between the two countries in such matters. Mr. Mann mentioned the MLAT. He mentioned Sarvinder Singh Parmar. I remember October 1992. That's when I joined as Deputy Secretary Pakistan in the Ministry of External Affairs. One of the first things that I sort of confronted or was faced with was the killing of Talvinder Singh Parmar. I think it was in Jalandhar, if I'm not mistaken. But I think
That's right, yes.
what has happened is that the Canadian government, over the like father, like son, Mr. Pierre Trudeau, Mr. Justin Trudeau, they've all given sanctuary. They relies on that vote. They rely on that vote bank in British Columbia and elsewhere. And I said, I mean, as I said, this should be of security concern to Canada more than India, because they are not going to get a Khalistan in India. So where will they get it? In British Columbia? I mean, that's something that they need to ponder over.
But, Brahma Chaleni has been mentioning this, and I want to take your view before I go back to him. What is India doing about it? That's the central question. We can't just look at Canada alone. They may have their own reasons. They may have their own problems and compulsions. But don't you think this is a great opportunity for India to now tell Canada, you want to do business with us, you have to listen to our concerns?
Of course, I think it's very important. We don't even have a High Commissioner, because the previous High Commissioner, whom I know personally, an outstanding officer, was declared a person of interest. It's absolutely absurd that the High Commissioner, the representative of the President of the Republic of India, could be involved in anything as bizarre as trying to eliminate Mr. Nijjar or anybody else. So I think Canada needs to do a lot of soul searching. We are going to press when we have our High Commissioner in place, and I'm sure even through other channels, our so-called, if there is a security cooperation, then at the level of NSA and at various levels, we would be continually in sort of stressing this point that unless Canada takes action against Khalistani terrorists, relations between the two countries are not going anywhere. And the big market that India is beckoning. I was High Commissioner in London, so I know exactly how India's economic transformation has changed hearts in various chancelleries in the world, and I hope Canada is one of them.
Brahma Chaleni, you're convinced that India can use this sufficiently, and maybe time has come for Canada to realize that it has more other pressing issues than wanting to use this K gang as some sort of a pressure tactic against India?
India is now the fourth largest economy. It will soon be the third largest economy. Look at the irony. The G7 summit, the G7 is supposed to be a organization of the world's leading economies.
Yes.
India is only a special invitee,
Yes.
not a regular member of the G7. It goes to show how irrelevant the G7 is becoming, because the G7's share of the global GDP has been dwindling. India needs to be a regular member of the G7. In fact, the G7 needs to be expanded. But the real point about Canada is this, that partly it's domestic politics, because Khalistani extremists have captured the Gurdwaras. These are cash-rich individuals. They are very well organized. They fund political activity. They fund important politicians in both parties. The second more important reason is what the Indian High Commissioner, Sanjay Verma, said on Canadian television before he left Ottawa after being expelled. He said Khalistani extremists and terrorists are, quote unquote, deep assets of CSIS, the Canada's main intelligence agency. Now, if they are deep assets of Canada's intelligence service, obviously, we cannot expect Canada to clean up its act, just the way Pakistan refuses to clean up its act. If the Canadian intelligence is nurturing these elements, in fact, according to Canadian press reports, Nijjar, before he was assassinated, in the months before his assassination, or his killing, I should say, because there's no evidence that it was a political killing. In the months before his killing, according to the Vancouver Sun, CSIS officers regularly met with Nijjar. Now you can understand intelligence officers meeting with Nijjar once, twice, thrice about security matters. But every week, according to the Vancouver Sun, in other words, they were treating Nijjar as an intelligence asset.
So what's the way forward? What's the way forward? What should India do given these realities? It can't really cut off Canada completely either. That's not a solution, cutting off ties with a country.
No, Canada and India are two leading democracies. They need to have a cooperative relationship, and traditionally they've had a friendly relationship. But India has to leverage its economic strength, the fact that the Indians in Canada are one of the largest communities in Canada. The Sikhs in Canada constitute the world's largest Sikh diaspora. All that hands India significant leverage because these are Canadian citizens now. They need to come to India, whether they are Sikhs or Hindus. All that provides India leverage. India has to use
that leverage. You know, India is always very reluctant to do this, Ramneek Maan. This question has been raised several times, particularly since this standoff with Canada, that why don't we do more? You know, a lot of these people who are in Canada, who are known members of the Khalistani gang, they work against Indian interests. You know, there is more action that the Indian government can take, even with them sitting overseas against their assets. There are other interests, human interests that they may have in India. You know, we've got to start reacting as a tough state.
No, that we are. We have been asserting ourselves, and that's why you see the kind of reaction that has been coming from. You know, diplomatic relations are primarily based on reciprocity, mutual reciprocity. And that's where the dip came in, I believe. But then again, you know, it was India showing its strength, diplomatically speaking, that we had to put our foot down. But as a matter of fact, you see, I believe what Chalani Saab said is absolutely correct, that the CSIS and these, Five Eyes countries are using K-goons and the other elements to try and keep India under check, somehow or the other exert pressure on India. And all of this, you know, emanating from their land. He's also right when he says that CSIS officials were in touch, because this has come out from nobody else but Nijjar's own son. As a matter of fact, Nijjar entered Canada as Ravi Sharma, and that's how, you know, he actually got his citizenship from after the intervention of CSIS. So this is a very deep-rooted conspiracy against these.
Ramneek, my question is, can't India do more against the known operatives of the Khalistani gang in Canada? Can't we do more? Not diplomatically, I'm saying as individuals.
India had adopted a carrot and stick approach, because if you remember that there was a blacklist of people who were barred from entering India, and that blacklist was slowly, you know, faded away and finished eventually. That was a welcome step that the government of India took to actually, you know, try and bridge the, the gaps. But that didn't work. The Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, has done so much for Sikhs, you can't even imagine. But then again, you see the images coming from Canada, which are heartbreaking.
So appeasement doesn't work, no. That's precisely the point. There's no point appeasing these individuals. They've made up their mind. Besides, it's not our responsibility.
The money trail is not broken unless, you know, these people are stopped funding or stopped protecting from the Canadian system or the US system. Because these Five Eye countries have been the ones behind, the brains behind this Khalistani agitation. As a matter of fact, my sources tell me that this visit by the Prime Minister in G7 has actually shaken up the Khalistanis there. They have not been paid for the agitation that they had put out this time. So there are cracks that we see, but India has to go strength. It has to show its strength.
Well, it is also about Canada to make up its mind, what it really wants to focus on, because both of these cannot go on as usual. There can be no business as usual.
Yeah, that's what I said. You can't be running with the hare and hunting with the hound. You have to take a side finally.
Speaking of that adage, I do want to take our guest's opinion on the other story that we're tracking. I request your indulgence. Please stay with me, gentlemen, because US President Donald Trump hosted Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir for a closed-door lunch at the White House yesterday, a meeting that hasn't gone down well with India, even with Indian society. I think the US establishment should know this isn't about government alone and diplomacy alone. This is about how the Indian public will feel about US and Donald Trump. The meeting comes amidst escalating tensions between Israel and Iran. Donald Trump, we are being told, is exploring Washington's possible involvement in this war, and Islamabad is known for its close ties with Iran. But does it mean that Donald Trump will push Munir to back US and Israel actions and go against a Muslim country? Remember, Pakistan has condemned Israel's airstrikes against Iran, but it is likely that America will use Pakistan against Iran. Following that meeting, we are learning from our top diplomatic sources that Trump put forth a list of demands. These include, with tensions rising in the Middle East and growing fears of a full-scale Iran-Israel conflict, he has reportedly asked Pakistan for unconditional military and strategic support, demanding air bases and ground support from Pakistan. Trump even offered Pakistan new security and trade agreements in return. He asked Munir reportedly to say no to China and Russia, engage more in trade only with the US, and assured mediation in Kashmir and Indus Water Treaty related issues. Now, this is of particular interest to India because of the hyphenation that Donald Trump has tried to do between India and Pakistan, but also the fact that there is Brahmachaleni hypocrisy writ large, isn't it?
Yes, unfortunately, what we are seeing is the return of the infamous US tilt to Pakistan, the Cold War era tilt that became famous in 1971 during the Bangladesh War of Liberation. It began with Biden. Biden was the one who initiated the bailout packages, IMF bailout packages for Pakistan. His administration modernized Pakistan's F-16 fleet to make it more lethal against India. The Biden administration also helped Pakistan exit the FATF gray list. Now, Trump has taken off from where Biden has left, indicating that the US deep state wants to revive the Cold War era US-Pakistan strategic collaboration.
And so this is not just Trump as a rogue element running roughshod on systematic issues and procedures in American administration. Do you think this is very much the US deep state?
Exactly. The Biden administration was the one that played the Khalistani card against India. It was the administration that shared patchy intelligence with Ottawa about Niger. The Biden White House hosted Khalistani activists for a briefing just before Modi arrived last year, in September last year, for the Quad Summit. It was playing the Khalistani card against India, the human rights card against India. All that was out, they're doing it openly.
Okay.
And I think Trump's meeting with Asim Munir sends a potent geopolitical signal, chiefly aimed at India. We should not forget that Munir's invitation to the US predates Israel's war against Iran. So clearly,
they already had plans for him.
Yes.
Mr. Sinha, you want to weigh in on this? Why are we seeing this sudden, or I'm calling this sudden because there was a sense of greater partnership, understanding in Indo-US relationships, right? And suddenly we see this specter where it's almost as if America has forgotten all the history involved. And Brahmachaleni seems to believe this isn't just, a president who doesn't care much for what has come before him or what may come after him. This is very much the deep state. Then it's a very concerning matter for India.
Well, Shivani, you must remember that Pakistan was midwifed by the West, by the British, supported by the Americans. And since its inception, it has prostrated itself. I'm not going to use a word I used last night in another channel, a similar sounding word. It prostrates itself in front of the highest bidder. And it has been in the American camp, if you could put it that way, right from its inception. You recall Seato, Cento, Baghdad Pact, etc. So even after the Cold War, when 9/11 happened, I was in New York, posted in our Indian mission to the UN. I recall how Musharraf was able to ingratiate himself with the Americans. And despite the threat by Armitage that they would bomb Pakistan to the Stone Age if they didn't cooperate, the fact is that Pakistan has been adept, and I use what Mr. Mann had used in that previous debate, run with the hare and hunt with the hound. And they've past masters of that. As far as the current outreach to Pakistan is concerned, I've read, and I really don't know whether it's, but certain business deals in cryptocurrency and rare earth, etc. A gentleman called Gentry Beach in Florida, if I'm not mistaken, and his links with people close to the president. That's what I read. I don't know whether it's correct or not, but it makes a lot of sense because when Prime Minister Modi visited in February, the sort of bonhomie, the reception he got was very good.
Sir, can
And
I ask you?
suddenly-
Can I ask you? I have limited time. Very quickly, wouldn't this be sending alarm bells in the Indian diplomatic circles? And if so, how is India supposed to handle this now?
That's why you recall that President Trump called Prime Minister Modi in Canada and asked him to stop by in Washington.
Yes.
Obviously, the idea was to try and mediate and then, claim the success.
Some sort of credit of the,
He-
yes.
He realized after speaking to Prime Minister Modi that Prime Minister Modi reiterated that India will never accept mediation, and it has never in the past accepted mediation either. So I think as far as the Indian government is concerned, of course we'd be concerned, but not unduly alarmed. But
Okay.
this is not the first time that the US
Has done something like this. This is a reminder, in fact, Brahmachalini, very quickly, I have 30 seconds only, sir, a reminder why India can never trust US fully.
Well, Biden and now Trump are clearly showing that the US is not a reliable strategic partner of India.
Yes.
And by hosting Munir, Trump is legitimizing the Pakistan Army's role, not just domestically in Pakistan, but also
internationally.
in shaping regional security.
Yes.
And Trump is also signaling that his foreign policy will follow his own instincts and strategic calculus, not Indian regional concerns. Those concerns are going to be sidestepped. In effect, India may be a strategic partner of America. This is the message that he's conveying, that it may be a strategic partner of America, but not a veto holder over
Yeah.
US dealings with Pakistan.
But how do they expect us to do any military business with them? Is frankly that boggles my mind, to do this and then to also expect that India will in any way ever strengthen its military buying relationship with America. But I've run out of time. I do thank our guests for joining us. Speaking of the US, remember Israel and Iran are continuing to launch airstrikes against each other, and the US role is currently being monitored. Israel targeted key facilities in Iran's nuclear program, while Iran retaliated by striking an Israeli hospital. Interestingly, Russian and Chinese presidents both have condemned the Israeli strikes and have asked for immediate ceasefire. This even as there is much speculation on whether US President Donald Trump will formally enter the conflict or not. Now, why should USA get involved? Well, because a key strike on Iran's nuclear base of Fordo is key, and only US can do this. This base is called Iran's Mount Doom. It is around 262 to 295 feet below the ground, 100 kilometers away from the capital of Tehran. An entire region is mountainous. It is considered safe from aerial bomb threats and is not easy to penetrate because it's buried deep. This is why the US gets involved, because the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, or MOP, is a powerful bunker buster bomb developed by the US's Air Force. It weighs approximately 30,000 pounds, is designed to destroy heavily fortified underground bunkers made from high-performance steel alloy, built to withstand impact without breaking, and it can penetrate up to 200 feet into the ground. Engineered for maximum durability and damage, this bomb is particularly significant due to its ability to reach and destroy these well-protected targets, such as those involved in weapons of mass destruction program, and can be carried by strategic bombers like the B-2 Spirit alone. Now, US is not is opposed to the nuclear program in Iran, but it also has substantial military interests in the area, which is why it could get involved. The United States holds the largest military base in the region that houses 10,000 personnel, jets, drones, and a lot more at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Camp Arif Jan in Kuwait holds around 13,000 troops, second largest US military base in the region. Naval support activity in Bahrain houses US Navy's 5th Fleet and approximately 9,000 personnel. The Al Dafta Air Base in UAE hosts the aircrafts like F-22 Raptors. Stealth jets houses surveillance planes and drones. The Erbil Air Base in Iraq is also used for air operations. So the big question is, will Trump really bite the bullet? That analysis is coming up with our guests in just a bit.
The past 6 days, Iran has launched over 450 ballistic missiles and hundreds of UAVs. This is exactly why we cannot and we will not allow this regime to obtain nuclear weapons.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war, things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Major Dan Pfefferman is former IDF or the Israeli Defense Force member and foreign policy expert. Glenn Carl is former CIA officer. I do thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Major Pfefferman, I begin with you. Israeli military has announced that they continue to strike nuclear sites in Bushehr, Ifshan, Natanz, that 2/3 of Iran's missile launchers have been struck. But there is a sense growing that maybe Israel underestimated what Iran was capable of, and for that final blow or final solution to the Iranian nuclear sites, are you dependent on the US support?
Thanks for having me on again. First of all, I think we overestimated, and that's always a good thing in military conflicts, is to overestimate your enemy, your capabilities, to not rush into war. We thought and understood, and now we're feeling it, that there are very clear consequences for launching such a strike. It is important to always put into context for our global viewers that this is a conflict that Iran started long ago against Israel. And as Iran came closer and closer to achieving nuclear weapons capacity, Israeli leaders felt they could not wait around any longer. We estimated that the Iranian missile attacks would be much more severe. We estimated that we would need at least a week longer than it took us to neutralize Iran's air defense capabilities. And we estimated many thousands of casualties in Israel from Iran itself, but also from Hezbollah and from other Iranian proxies. And so we're actually, although we have lost well over 20 civilians and many, as you can see on the screen, civilian infrastructure, including now a major hospital, have been hit and badly damaged. This is part of the price that Israeli leaders and Israeli society, it's important to say, Israeli society is willing to pay.
Okay, but what about the dependence on US as far as those bunker busters are concerned? It doesn't seem like this conflict will move very further until US decides whether it wants to help you or not.
Well, the U.S. entering this conflict, first of all, that needs to be an internal American decision, and it needs to be in accordance with American interests. Israel has never asked, nor does it want any other country to fight its battles for it. I believe that taking out Iran's ballistic missile and nuclear weapons capability is absolutely in America's interests, but President Trump was democratically elected on an America First policy, and that is correct for the American people. So that he needs to consider, and the United States leadership needs to consider, what is there. Will America's entrance and the use of the bunker busters, the GBU ordinances that can penetrate, the Fordo centrifuge area that is some 90 meters underground, yes, it's very helpful. Israel had no pretensions that it can completely dismantle Iran's nuclear program on its own. What Israel is doing, though, is looking at the nuclear program, missile program, regime, decision-making capacity from a holistic aspect. And so it's taking out all of the different parts of what we can call the supply chain of a nuclear and ballistic missile and military apparatus, and it's not just hitting one site. Ultimately, what we would need to see is much like Gaddafi gave up Libya's nuclear program. You would want to see the Iranian regime completely give up all pretensions of a nuclear program, or best case scenario, that the people of Iran would rise up and take out this terrible regime.
Yes. Glenn Carl, the Iranian leader Khamenei has said the very fact that the Zionist regime's American friends have entered the scene and are saying such things, he's talking about some of the threatening statements coming in from Donald Trump and others, is a sign of that regime's weakness and inability. Now, the biggest question on everybody's mind is, will US bite the bullet or not? I'm seeing flashes of a report where Trump has apparently asked if bunker busters are going to be effective in Iran. He's considering it. He hasn't denied it. What do you think? Which way will he go?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yes.
I think he is, unusually, Trump was straightforward and honest when he said that he hasn't decided yet and nobody knows because he doesn't know. Certainly, American involvement is more likely today and was more likely yesterday than it was 5 days ago and 6 days ago. The structural issue has not been addressed by Israel. Israel's attacks have been tactically brilliant. The intelligence operation and then the commando raids and the Air Force and so on. It's one of the great intelligence successes in history, literally. However, tactical success is not strategic success. And the strategic equation, the problem is that Iran has sworn to destroy Israel, kill every Jew, and throw them all into the ocean, into the sea. And until that changes, there's not strategic security for Israel or in the region, frankly. Now, Iran is really on its heels. They have put themselves into a box by endlessly provoking through surrogates Israel, and for that matter, other parties, the United States included, in the region. But until there's a regime change, all the phenomenal success that Israel has had with Hezbollah, with Hamas, with militants or surrogates in Iraq doesn't change the structural, existential issue. That would lean towards U.S. involvement if the U.S. wants to address the long-term problem. However, that sounds clean, but it wouldn't be. Exactly. Nobody can control a society of 90 million people if the government implodes or explodes. And so things could end up worse or better. Now, one other point on the bunker busters and American involvement. Israeli intelligence is impressive. They estimate that the Fordo's site is 90 meters underground. Perhaps that's accurate, but there are also reports that are credible that it could be 1,000 meters underground.
1,000 meters? And
even I've heard reports of that. I can't substantiate. I do, of course, do not know. But even if a bomb is used and appears to be successful, I would not trust my eyes. I would want Israeli or American people on the site to verify. You don't accept anything in intelligence unless it is corroborated multiple ways. So the dilemma is acute for Israel and for the United States. The inclination to draw the reasons to become involved are strong, but the consequences could be catastrophic too. So I think Trump is sort of in the right place, not knowing what to do yet.
Speaking of those reasons of what's keeping America guessing or thinking right now, I do want to understand from you, Glenn Carl, is the Russian support to Iran, the Chinese support to Iran in this conflict, do you think these are also some of the factors that are playing out? Both these leaders, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, have said that they have condemned Israel's conduct. They've said there's no military solution to the conflict. They have urged immediate halt of attacks on the Bushehr nuclear plant in Iran, where Russian specialists also work. Do you think these are also factors?
Well, there are factors, but there's one can only smile, really, that Vladimir Putin is offering to mediate peace and is a little bit like the fox telling people not to steal eggs out of the chicken coop.
But everybody's offering to mediate peace these days. That seems to be the in vogue thing. Every leader is offering to do so.
Peace. Everybody likes peace. It's very easy to say. China has postured itself in a classic way. I mean, all countries do this, that they can mediate and isn't peace nice and stop killing everybody. But, once again, anyone who's ever heard me on the air or read anything I've written knows that I am not a supporter of Donald Trump. However, Trump's response to Putin's offer to mediate was, well, perhaps you should stop the war in Ukraine first, which seems to me a reasonable point to make. However, on the positioning of Russia and China will lose if oil prices go up and Iran can no longer be one of their tools to obtain energy. They're the big loser. Would they do anything beyond posturing and saying nice things? I think not. It's conceivable if Iran had more capabilities than they appear to have militarily. They might do what they've done with Russia, which is not provide overt weapons, however, sell them 100,000 washing machines which have computer chips that can be used in missiles or something to that effect. But that's way down the road. I don't see that happening.
Okay.
And similarly, Ukraine, Russia can't really do much either. They're the ones who are obtaining drones from Iran, and I don't see them being able to do more than talk at present.
Yes, but it can be about, more lines being drawn as far as US's relationship with some of these countries are concerned. It's not great relationship with Russia and China to begin with already. But Dan Pfefferman, I do want to ask you, what are the estimates in Israel of how soon can Israel end this conflict, get to its end game, achieve its target? It seems like, once again, all of that is up in the air, or is it? Do you feel confident that Israel is looking at an end?
I do. I've often been, from a policy and strategy perspective, I've often been critical that we, as my co-panelist here, Mr. Carl, said, we're very good on the tactical level. We don't always know how to connect that to strategic objectives, and that is a criticism that I've often voiced myself. What seems to be the case here, despite the bluster by Israeli leaders, is a very clear understanding that there is a limit to what we can achieve with our precise and still somewhat limited airstrikes. We cannot certainly target all the way down to Fordo, and even if we could, one of the key issues that always came up in the internal debate and the policy debate on whether Israel, the United States, the West, etc., should attack Iran's nuclear program was the fact that, unlike Libya, unlike Syria, this is a domestic program. The scientists, the know-how are local, so they have the knowledge to reconstitute this. Now, many of the scientists were taken out in the first wave of strikes, and a number of senior scientists have been assassinated over the last years, reportedly by Israel. The nuclear archives in Tehran were infiltrated by Israel, and I think they were bombed in this round of strikes as well. So it is a bit of a cat and mouse game, and Israel understands that it cannot single-handedly completely take it out. What I would expect to see is one of two things happening. One is that in about maybe 2 weeks' time, according to what Israeli leaders are saying, Israel will seek an off-ramp from this conflict itself, saying that it achieved a significant delay to the program, and I think Iran would be happy for a calming of tensions as it's taken a strong hit. The other, which I think might be what the Americans are angling for, is using Israel as a sort of bad cop in this routine, an attack dog, where the Iranians come to the table, and then Trump gets to claim a foreign policy victory of getting Iran to give up significant portions, if not all, of this program, under the guise of what Israel already achieved and what a U.S. entrance would achieve if that were to happen.
Well, certainly, this whole attempt to be seen as somebody who has stopped a war, has stopped a conflict, got something great in a deal, seems to be something that Donald Trump is very interested in. We know all about that in India as well. But Glenn Clark, final comment. What does your gut say? Do you think America has the appetite domestically to get involved in this conflict? It could be actually pretty quick if they do. I don't know if you disagree with that, but do you see that happening?
Well, it's quick in the sense that it's easy to destroy things. I think Israel by itself could destroy the Iranian regime, and the U.S. certainly can. But that's the easy thing that doesn't look beyond tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And Major Pfefferman, you and I have all been touching upon the strategic complexities that are really unsolvable. Israel's dilemma was that can we accept an existential risk? And they decided no. And they said it is better to buy some time of increased security and worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow never comes. Yes. And that's a pretty strong position to take. The U.S. population, is all public opinions, is contradictory. It doesn't want war, and it doesn't want Iran's regime. So that's incoherent and unhelpful.
Okay.
On the whole, they would oppose American involvement.
Yes, and that is also another factor playing in on why maybe it's taking so long to decide what America wants to do. I do thank all of our guests for joining us. We also leave you with this report from outside that hospital in Beersheba. Israel has, of course, talked about the damages that it has suffered. It has also accused Iranian regime of deliberately targeting non-military targets in Israel.
I've just been talking to the leader of the Knesset here to get his assessment of what has happened. I think we have that video that we're able to bring to you right now. And my first question to him was, was this a direct hit or was it a result of intercepts and fragments hitting? He said it was a direct hit. This is what he told me.
It was actually a direct impact right there on the hospital.
The Iranians say that there was an Israeli military base nearby.
Where is it? Can you show me anywhere in this radius a military base? There is none.
As far as the casualties here are concerned, we understand that it was just one woman in her 60s who was lightly injured, we were told, by shrapnel. I found a piece of shrapnel lying around here just a minute or so ago, and it looked pretty large, and if somebody had been hit by it, it potentially would have been lethal. We've seen while we've been here some of the patients who were in the hospital being taken away by their families. Most hospitals, or the majority of hospitals, particularly in urban centres over the past couple of days, have put their patients in the basements, in the car parks underneath the hospital, and the debris that could be seen inside here on the ground floor at least was broken glass, broken equipment, smoke in the corridors, rescue workers going through. And I don't know if Sanjeev, on the spur of the moment here, is going to be able to zoom in a little bit behind me, but there is an area in the center of the building between those two towers where you can sort of see the under part of a collapsed walkway there. Somebody walking across the walkway right now, so the structure not that badly damaged, but we haven't yet been able to get inside the building there, haven't been able to look at other floors in the building, haven't been able to make a further assessment, but certainly at ground level there was a lot of glass to be seen, and I think by the fact that the leader of the Knesset has been here to speak, the Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Securities Minister, has been here as well. And we've heard comments, from the Defense Minister, the Prime Minister, to up the number of strikes on Iran now, to up the pace. I think, and the way that the messaging around the hospital here is that it is clearly, according to Israeli officials, a direct strike, not anything else, according to them, a direct intentional strike by Iran. It is clear that this is really going to amp up the rhetoric, the strain on anyone trying to sort of bring about a ceasefire at the moment. When a hospital gets hit, it is emotive all round, and certainly that's the case today.
This is the truth.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Remember, our colleague Siddhant was just joining us. He was bringing us context around it. He was saying, okay, those are fresh visuals coming in of that incident. He was saying that this might provide impetus to the United States. Remember, the big question around this right now is whether or not the US will join in Israeli efforts right now as they attack Iran and Iran counterattacks Israel. Remember, there have been civilian losses on both sides. The Iran-Israel conflict, as it is being called, that has stretched over almost a week now, has seen civilian losses on both sides. But these fresh visuals coming in from the Soroka Medical Center, this is towards the south of Israel. Just take a look, listen in. Remember, the big question right now is whether or not the United States will participate in the Israel-Iran conflict as it's playing out right now. We know that the US president has approved an Iran attack plan according to some sources, but that no final decision, that's what we just shared with you, has been made. He said, I may not, nobody knows what I'm going to do. These visuals coming in, though, from Israel, whether or not they'll tip the scales, that remains the question. Our colleague Siddhant joining us right now. Siddhant, over to you.
Well, that's right. So this attack took place by this ballistic missile was fired from Iran, directly struck Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, which is in southern Israel. And in fact, the video which we are putting out on our screen is of the moment an Iranian missile hits the Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, southern Israel. In fact, as we were discussing before, Toya, that this will definitely be treated as a fresh escalation by Israel, and this particular attack on the hospital being targeted is coming day after Supreme Leader Khamenei yesterday warned Israel for consequences. And after which today hospital has been targeted by Iranian missile. Now, as far as casualties, we are still awaiting official version on it. We have very little detail about how many staff members and patients were present inside the hospital. But hitting a hospital perhaps could be a turning point in this war, Toya. Let me put it this way, because so far, there have been very minimum casualties in Israel. Israeli systems have managed to intercept Iranian missiles, but this particular strike could be a turning point in this war, and perhaps the reason which Israel was looking for, maybe to go after the Iranian regime, to bring down the Iranian regime. Now they will get that reason, even to convince the world, to convince United States to bring down the Iranian regime, and to convince the world that how Iranian regime is an existential threat for them.
Iranian news media sources, though, have been claiming that Israeli strikes have taken place, damaging hospitals in Iran. So those accounts have come in from publications in the Middle East. Siddhant, I just want to understand from you. You were telling us about the United States earlier. Can you explain to us regional players? So regional players like Saudi Arabia, for example, how are they aligning as this story develops?
Well, the other regional players, Toya, are in favor of diplomacy, are talking about de-escalation, etc., etc. But given the Iranian proxy network in the region, Toya, none of these countries have been very happy with that, or rather, have been very comfortable with that proxy network. So if it's Houthis, then Houthis target Saudi Arabian refineries. Okay. So, there is always one or the other reason why, these West Asian countries have largely been against Iran and Iranian nuclear program. None of them wants Iran to become a nuclear power. That is very sure. But they also want tensions to de-escalate. They want diplomacy. But there is also a strategic silence, Toya, on the part of West Asian countries. Let's highlight that. But as I said, that this particular attack of Iran on a hospital in Israel is going to be the turning point in this war, because this gives Israel a reason to go after the Iranian regime, to bring down the Iranian regime. Perhaps Israel has been saying in an interviews to CNN News 18 from day one that Iran's ballistic missiles, Iran's barrage, the number of ballistic missiles they have right now is not only a threat to Israel but whole of region and Europe. So that is exactly what they are trying to convince the world. They are trying to perhaps convince United States. And now they've got that reason where a civilian hospital, a medical center, has been hit by Iranian missile, and which is after Ayatollah Khamenei's warning to Israel yesterday. So definitely it will change the entire war, and this Israel will definitely be using it as an opportunity to convince United States, to convince the world that look how Iran is targeting our civilians, our medical facilities.
Siddhant, can you tell our audiences, the US President Donald Trump putting out a statement in which he's essentially said that the US knew where Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran, was, essentially implying that they knew where he was, they were choosing not to attack him. How did that statement go over Tehran's security forces? Did it cause a sense of fear within the establishment? Just bring us more context.
Well, as far as Iran is concerned, Toya, they are not ready to surrender. In fact, when yesterday also it was asked to President Trump that Supreme Leader says that he will not surrender, to which President Trump said that good luck to him. So, in fact, Israel so far has maintained that their ultimate objective is not.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I am Anand Narasimhan. Tensions have escalated in the Middle East due to the violent engagement between Israel and Iran for the 7th straight day, and on Thursday, both sides exchanged strikes. The Middle East has been the hotbed of military and militia-driven activity for the last few years now, and it's expected to see more, even with the United States almost on the cusp of joining in. That's the indication from President Donald Trump, giving hints that he might push the US directly into the fight. US President Donald Trump, who cut short